Simone Whitfield was 34 years old when she skipped her own keynote speech and flew home a day early to surprise her husband for Valentine's Day. 8 years of marriage, twin boys, a design studio she'd built while quietly shelving her own ambitions so Douglas could chase his. She walked through her front door, carrying roses and his favorite wine, following a trail of rose petals she never placed. She found Douglas on one knee in their living room. Not for her. For Ashley, 28, his account director, a woman Simone had never even heard him mention. The ring came from their joint credit line, the same account that was supposed to hold their son's college fund. Douglas said the word forever. Ashley said yes through tears. Neither of them noticed Simone standing in the doorway. Neither of them noticed her phone, already recording. She didn't scream. She didn't drop the roses. She simply watched, memorized every second, and backed quietly out the door. Douglas had no idea the video was already saved. And he had no idea what his wife did for a living. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The green room smelled like fresh coffee and dry erase markers. Simone Whitfield sat in a folding chair near the back wall, her presentation clicker resting in her palm. She hadn't turned it on. The little device felt heavier than it should for a piece of plastic smaller than a candy bar. Through the thin partition wall, she could hear the conference host warming up the crowd. 2,000 interior designers, architects, and industry buyers, all of them waiting. All of them expecting to hear from her. Simone Whitfield, founder of Lineweight Studio, one of Chicago's most promising voices in boutique residential design. That's what the program said, word for word. She read it again, from the printed booklet on the chair beside her, and felt something close to embarrassment. Not because it wasn't true, but because of the gap between what the words promised and what she knew was actually happening inside her studio right now. Lineweight was good. Her work was good. She knew that, but promising was a word for someone still climbing. She was 34. She'd been climbing for a long time. 2 years ago, a commercial developer had offered her the chance to expand. A second location, a bigger team, a contract that would have tripled Lineweight's revenue. She had the proposal printed and highlighted and sitting on her desk the night she and Douglas talked it over at the kitchen table. She hadn't signed it. Douglas had gotten the offer from Meridian Group the same week. Senior VP, regional head of their Chicago and Detroit accounts. More travel, more money, more of everything he'd been chasing since she met him at 28. She remembered the way his face looked when he told her about it. Like a kid who'd just been handed something he didn't think he'd earned yet. Lit up, almost surprised, needing her to confirm that it was real. She'd let the expansion offer expire. She'd told herself it wasn't the right time. She'd told herself there would be other windows. She was still waiting for the next one. Simone set the clicker down on the chair. She pressed her fingers against her collarbone, the way she always did when she needed to slow her thoughts down. A habit from childhood. Her mother used to say she thought too loud. She caught her own reflection in the dark screen of the monitor across the room. She looked fine. She knew she looked fine. But fine had started to feel like a word with a ceiling on it. Her body had changed after the twins, not dramatically, not in ways anyone else would point to, but she knew. She knew the way only you could know your own body after it had done something enormous, and then tried to quietly return to normal. The softness at her hips.
The way her arms felt slightly less like hers. Small things, the kind of things Douglas had never mentioned, not once, but that she sometimes imagined him noticing in the particular silence after she undressed. She was turning 35 in 3 months. She stood up, smoothed her blazer, picked up her phone. She was going home. The conference coordinator, a young woman named Beth with a headset and a clipboard, blinked at her twice when Simone broke the news. "I understand," Simone told her. "I'll send a recorded version of the full presentation by end of week. I'm sorry for the short notice. There's a family matter." It wasn't entirely a lie. Valentine's Day was tomorrow. Douglas had been traveling more than usual lately. 3 trips in 6 weeks, most of them 1 or 2 days longer than the itinerary he'd given her. She wanted to remind him she was still here, that they were still here. She'd bought the roses already, ordered them to be picked up at a shop near O'Hare. She had a bottle of the Bordeaux he loved in her carry-on, wrapped in a sweater so it wouldn't clink. A surprise, a good one, the kind that said, "I see you, I chose you." Still. She zipped her suitcase and called him while she waited for the elevator. It rang 4 times. "Hey." His voice was flat. Not tired flat, distracted flat. "Hey, yourself," she said. "I'm heading out early. Thought I'd come home tonight instead of tomorrow." A pause. Short, but there. "Tonight? I thought the keynote was—" "I decided to skip it." She kept her voice light. "I miss home. Figured I'd surprise you." "Oh." Another beat. "Yeah, sure. I've got some work stuff tonight, so I might be late." "That's okay. I'll be there when you get in." "Okay." His tone hadn't changed, hadn't warmed even a degree. "Safe flight." He hung up before she could say anything else. She stood in the elevator with her suitcase and her wrapped bottle of Bordeaux and told herself it was nothing. He was busy. He was always busy. That was the job. The elevator doors opened to the lobby. Her phone buzzed. A calendar notification. The shared family app they'd set up years ago to keep track of each other's schedules. A restaurant alert. Reservation update. Auberge. Valentine's, 7 p.m. Cancelled. Rebooked under Monroe. Simone stood very still. The lobby moved around her. Voices, rolling luggage, the revolving door letting in a cold slap of February air. Monroe. She read it again, then a 3rd time. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She didn't know anyone named Monroe. She closed the app, slipped her phone into her coat pocket, picked up the handle of her suitcase. Then she pulled up the airline app and booked the earliest flight home she could find. O'Hare was loud and white and cold. Simone moved through the terminal with her carry-on rolling behind her, the Bordeaux still wrapped in her sweater, still safe. She'd checked the flight status 3 times before boarding. On time, direct, touching down at 4:47 p.m., a full day ahead of schedule. She picked up the roses from the shop near baggage claim, 2 dozen, deep red, the kind that looked almost burgundy under warm light. The florist wrapped them in brown craft paper and tied them with a thin strip of twine, and Simone carried them under one arm the way she used to carry portfolio rolls in design school, like something worth protecting. She felt better with them in her hands, more certain. The drive home was 40 minutes, give or take. She knew every mile of it. She'd made this drive after late client meetings, after hospital visits when the twins had back-to-back ear infections the winter they turned 2, after Douglas's work dinners when she'd pick him up because he never knew when to stop with the open bar. She knew when the highway opened up past the 190 junction. She knew which lane to take at the Harlem Avenue exit. She drove with the radio off. The family iPad sat propped against her bag in the passenger seat. She used it mostly for client presentations, but it shared the same accounts as her phone. Calendar, notes, the joint email for household bills. She'd glanced at it twice already. A habit. She couldn't explain why. 30 minutes out, it lit up. A notification from a hotel loyalty app. She didn't recognize the hotel name. Clarence Suites, River North. But the account was synced under Douglas's email address. She'd set up the shared tablet herself, years ago, and never thought to unlink his accounts. "Thank you for your stay. Your loyalty points have been updated. 3 nights, February 10 through 13. She read it at a red light. February 10th through the 13th. That was last week. Douglas had told her he was in Detroit. A client retreat, he'd said. 2 days, 3 nights. The light turned green. She set the iPad face down on the seat. She kept driving. It was nothing. Hotels made mistakes with dates all the time. Loyalty apps auto-populated from old bookings. There were 100 explanations. She turned onto the expressway ramp and reached over and flipped the iPad face up again. The second notification was already there, from the joint account banking app, a charge she hadn't seen before. Marcello and Sons Fine Jewelry, $4,118, posted February 12th. The roses shifted in her lap. She gripped the steering wheel tighter. $4,000 on the shared card. She hadn't bought anything from a jeweler. Her birthday wasn't until May. Valentine's Day was tomorrow. She tried to remember if Douglas had ever, in 9 years, spent $4,000 on jewelry for her. He hadn't. Her mother's voice came to her then, soft and dry the way it always was when it carried a warning. "You're too trusting, Simone. You always have been. You see what you want to see." Her mother had said that when Simone was 17 and a boyfriend had lied to her about something small. She'd said it again at 31, when Simone signed over the handling of their joint investment account entirely to Douglas without blinking. The way she said it was never cruel. It was more like a kind of grief, like she was watching her daughter walk towards something she couldn't stop her from reaching. Simone exhaled slowly. She was doing it again. She was building a story out of notifications. Douglas traveled constantly. Hotel apps were glitchy. Maybe the jewelry charge was her Valentine's gift. That would explain it. That would explain all of it. She wanted to believe that. She did believe it. Almost. She rehearsed the surprise the rest of the way home. She'd put the roses in the big glass vase on the kitchen counter, the one they'd bought at an estate sale in Michigan their second year together. She'd opened the Bordeaux to breathe. She'd ordered his favorite meal from the Italian place on Elm, rigatoni alla vodka, the good bread, set for pickup at 6. Candles on the table, the playlist she'd made last month and never used yet. Simple, warm. We are still us. She needed it to feel true again. She needed to walk through her front door and have the house smell like garlic and warm wax, and remind herself that 9 years of a life together didn't evaporate over a calendar notification and a jewelry charge. She turned onto their street. Douglas's car was in the driveway. She checked the clock on the dash. 5:22 p.m. He was never home before 7 on a weekday. Never. She slowed the car without meaning to. The front window faced the street, framed by the 2 evergreen shrubs she'd planted herself the first spring they lived there. Through the glass, she could see the warm glow of candlelight, and something on the floor just inside the door. Rose petals. Red ones. Simone pulled to the curb across the street and sat there for a long moment. The engine idled. The wrapped Bordeaux leaned against the roses in the passenger seat. Then she reached over, killed the engine, gathered the gifts, and stepped out of the car. She walked across the street slowly, her key already in her hand. The front door opened without a sound. Simone had oiled the hinges herself last October. She remembered doing it, crouched in the doorway on a Sunday morning with a rag and a small bottle of WD-40, while Douglas sat at the kitchen table reading something on his phone. He hadn't looked up. She stepped inside. The foyer was dim. The coat rack, the small console table, the framed print she'd sourced from an artist in New Orleans, all of it exactly where it always was. But the air smelled different, warmer, sweetened with something floral that wasn't her candles and wasn't her roses. She looked down. Red petals on the hardwood, a trail of them leading from the foot of the stairs toward the living room archway. She didn't move for a full 3 seconds. The candles were everywhere. A dozen of them, maybe more, set on the coffee table and the mantel and the side tables she had picked out from a salvage yard in Pilsen, the ones she'd stripped and refinished herself over a long weekend the year they moved in. The warm light jumped and shifted against the walls like something alive. It was beautiful. It was her home, decorated by someone else, for someone else. She heard his voice first. Low, practiced. The voice he used when he was performing sincerity. She knew that voice. She'd watched him use it on clients at dinner parties, on her family at holidays, on anyone who needed to believe that Douglas Whitfield was a man of depth. "I've been carrying this for months," he said. Because I wanted it to be right. Because you deserve right. Simone went very still. She pressed herself against the wall beside the archway. Her shoulder blades touched the surface she had painted herself. Pharaoh and ball, elephant's breath, 3 careful coats. She did not breathe. Through the archway she could see him. He was on one knee. The suit was the charcoal one she'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago. His back was mostly to her. In front of him stood a woman Simone had never seen before. Young, late 20s, pretty in the clean-lined, effortless way that people sometimes were when they hadn't yet had anything hard enough to mark them. She had one hand over her mouth. Her eyes were full. In Douglas's hand, a ring. Small velvet box tilted open toward her. Simone recognized the box. It was from Marcello & Sons, the jeweler on the notification, the $4,018 on their shared card. Ashley. His voice cracked just slightly, on purpose. Will you marry me? The woman, Ashley, let out a soft, wet sound that was half laugh and half cry. She nodded before she even spoke. Yes, she said. Yes, obviously yes. He stood and slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her in close, and she laughed into his shoulder, and he kissed her temple, and the candles on the mantel threw their shadows long across the floor. Simone's hands were steady. She didn't understand that, later. She thought she would remember her hands shaking, but they didn't shake. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone with the same calm she used when she was measuring a wall. She opened the camera. She pressed record. 40 seconds. The ring on Ashley's finger catching the light. Douglas's face in profile, eyes closed, smiling the way he used to smile at Simone. Ashley's tears. His hands in her hair. The petals on the floor of Simone's living room, in Simone's house, around Simone's furniture, under a ceiling Simone had chosen, beside a fireplace Simone had restored with her own hands over a single winter weekend because she loved this house and believed they were building something in it. She stopped recording at 40 seconds. She stepped back. 1 foot behind her, then the other, slow and precise, until she felt the edge of the door frame at her back. She eased herself through it. She pulled the door closed behind her, gently, the latch catching without a click. The cold air hit her face. She walked to her car in the driveway, not fast, not slow. She got in, closed the door, and set the wrapped Bordeaux and the brown paper roses on the passenger seat where the iPad had been. She sat still. The house glowed in front of her, candlelight in all the windows. She looked at her phone. The video was 43 seconds. She watched the first few frames, then locked the screen and opened her contacts. Isaiah's name was at the top. It always was. She called him. It rang once. "Hey, I thought you were in Chicago until tomorrow," he said. "I came home early." Her voice was level, quiet, like she was leaving a client a voicemail. "I need you to tell me what to do, legally, before I do anything else." A short pause on his end. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Where are you right now?" She turned the key in the ignition. The engine came on. She checked her mirrors and pulled away from the curb, the house shrinking in her rear view. "Driving," she said. Isaiah lived 12 minutes from her in a narrow 2-story off Damon that he'd bought before the neighborhood got expensive. He answered the door before she knocked. He must have been watching from the window. He looked at her face and didn't say anything. He just stepped aside. His kitchen was the opposite of hers. No color, no warmth, no carefully sourced tile or pendant lights. Just a long oak table, bright overheads, and the kind of clean that came from a man who rarely cooked. A laptop was already open on the table. A glass of water sat beside it. She appreciated that he hadn't poured wine. She sat down. He sat across from her and folded his hands on the table and waited. Isaiah had always known when to wait. She turned her phone toward him and pressed play. He watched the whole thing without speaking. His jaw tightened at the ring. He watched it a second time, slower. Then he set the phone down between them. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she repeated. "Don't call him tonight. Don't go back to that house. Don't text him anything." His voice was flat and deliberate, like he was reading from a list he'd already made. "You do not confront Douglas until we know exactly where you stand financially and legally. Agreed?" "Agreed." "Good." He turned the laptop toward her. "Log in." She typed in her credentials for their joint bank portal. Her fingers moved without hesitation. She'd checked this account 100 times, for groceries, for contractors, for quarterly tax transfers. It was as familiar to her as her own name. The account summary loaded. She stared at it. Isaiah leaned forward. He pointed at the screen. "This one. What is this account used for?" It was labeled TFJ&M, the shorthand they'd set up together 3 years ago, the week after the twins were born. Jasper and Maya. She could still remember Douglas suggesting they automate the transfers, acting like it was his idea, acting like he was the kind of father who planned ahead. "College fund," she said. Isaiah didn't say anything. He just pulled up the transaction history and turned the screen so she could read it clearly. She read it. 12 months of withdrawals. Not big ones, not all at once. Small enough to miss if you weren't looking closely. 200 here, 800 there. A transfer of $1,500 in September that she would have assumed was a tax payment if she'd seen it at all. The balance that should have been just over $41,000 sat now at $9,000 and change. Her eyes moved down the page. Methodical. The same way she read supplier invoices. One transfer, dated 6 weeks back, matched almost exactly the charge from Marcello and Sons. $4,012. Another transfer, 11 days later, for $8,500. She didn't recognize the payee code, but Isaiah was already typing. "That's a holding deposit," he said. "A condo. I can find the address in about 3 minutes." He found it in 2. She looked at the address. It meant nothing to her, which somehow made it worse.
A building she'd never passed, a unit number she'd never had reason to know. A whole second life, down payment and everything, built on money she had helped earn and set aside for her children. She leaned back in her chair. This was the part where she understood, fully and completely and without any room left for doubt, that what she had walked into tonight was not a mistake, not a moment of weakness, not a man who had fallen into something and didn't know how to get out. This was a plan, a year-long plan, careful, deliberate, patient. While she was flying to conferences and turning down keynotes and skipping expansion offers and refinishing furniture and painting walls in colors she'd chosen because she wanted their home to feel like something worth coming back to, he had been doing this. Every phone call where he'd been short with her, every evening he was traveling, every time she'd caught herself in a mirror and wondered if he still found her beautiful, and told herself she was being insecure, and let it go. He hadn't fallen out of love with her. He had simply decided she was no longer useful to the version of his life he was building, and he'd begun dismantling her without telling her. And he had used her children's future to pay for it. She sat with that for a moment, let it move through her completely, the grief and the rage and the specific, sickening shame of having been fooled by someone she had trusted entirely. She let it all the way in. Then she set it down. Not aside, not away. She set it down the way you set down a tool when you're switching to a different one. "I want to know everything," she said. Her voice was calm. "Every account. Every transfer, every document with both our names on it. I want to know the full picture before I make a single move." Isaiah studied her face for a moment. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. "Tomorrow morning," he said. 8 o'clock. Bring coffee." "I'll bring coffee." Patricia Whitfield lived in a wide, cream-colored colonial in Evanston that smelled like fabric softener and fresh-cut roses. She answered the door in a silk blouse and pressed slacks, as though she'd been expecting company, though Simone had only called 20 minutes before.
"Simone!"
Patricia's arms opened wide.
"Oh, sweetheart, come in, come in."
Her voice was soft, her eyes were sharp. Simone let herself be hugged. She kept her own arms loose and her face turned slightly, the way she'd learned to do in rooms where the lighting was wrong for the image she needed to project. She had dressed for this the way she dressed for difficult client meetings, simple, polished, slightly tired around the eyes. Not a woman with evidence, a woman with questions she didn't know how to ask. Patricia led her to the sitting room, the formal one, not the kitchen. Ivory-upholstered chairs, a glass coffee table, a vase of white lilies that were one day past fresh. Simone noticed all of it automatically. 14 years of reading rooms. A tray was already waiting, 2 china cups, a small pot of coffee, a plate of almond cookies that Patricia had not baked herself. Simone sat. She folded her hands in her lap. "I just needed to talk to someone," she said. Her voice came out smaller than her normal voice. She had practiced that on the drive over. "Douglas has been so distant. I don't know what I'm doing wrong." Patricia poured the coffee without being asked. Her movements were smooth, certain, the movements of a woman who had decided something a long time ago and was very comfortable with it. "You're not doing anything wrong, sweetheart," she said. She handed Simone the cup. "Sometimes people grow in different directions." "I keep thinking," Simone said, "if I had done something differently, if I had been more present," Patricia said, gently, like she was finishing a sentence and doing Simone a favor. Simone looked up. "What?" Patricia set down her own cup. She tilted her head. There was pity on her face. Real pity, which was almost worse than contempt. "You've been very focused on your work, Simone. That's admirable. But a man like Douglas, at his stage," she paused, like she was choosing her words kindly, "he needs a partner who is there. Fully there. Not flying to conferences, not buried in fabric samples." Simone said nothing. Patricia took that as permission to continue. "I told him this, actually, months ago." Her voice dropped into the register of confidence, the tone of someone sharing what they already believed was obvious. "I told him that a man his age deserves a wife who still tries, who still makes the effort. It's not cruel, Simone. It's honest." The room was very quiet. Simone took a slow sip of her coffee. It was too strong and slightly bitter, but she swallowed it without expression. "And Ashley," Simone said carefully. Carefully, like she was stepping onto glass she wasn't sure would hold. "Is that her name?" Patricia's eyes flickered, just once. "He told you." "He mentioned her," Simone said, nothing more. Patricia exhaled, and the sound of it was almost a relief, a woman setting down a weight she'd been carrying and finding it lighter than expected. "She's lovely, Simone. She really is. She's young, and she's driven, and she looks at him the way—" She stopped. She had the decency to stop. "How long have you known?" Simone asked. "Since October," Patricia said. No hesitation, no apology. "I know that's hard to hear, but I want you to understand that I do care about you. I'm not saying this to be unkind." "Of course not," Simone said softly. "I even helped him choose the ring." A small, almost private smile crossed Patricia's face. "He wanted something with presence, something that said, forever. I thought, at least he's doing this right." Simone looked at Patricia's face, the pride on it, the settled, satisfied pride of a woman who believed she had done a good thing. She thought about the twins, about Jasper and Maya, who were 6 years old and had no idea that the money set aside for their futures had paid for that ring. She picked up an almond cookie. She took a small bite and nodded, like it was good. "I appreciate you being honest with me, Patricia," she said. "I mean that." Patricia reached over and patted her hand. "You're going to be okay. You're a resourceful woman." "I know I am," Simone said. She sat in her car at the end of Patricia's driveway for exactly 4 minutes. She didn't cry.
She stared at the steering wheel and breathed through her nose, slow and even, until the heat behind her eyes cooled completely. Then she picked up her phone and called Isaiah. He answered on the second ring. "How'd it go?" "She helped him pick the ring," Simone said. "She's known since October. She called it doing the right thing." She paused. "Isaiah, I need you to look harder, not just at Douglas, at all of it. There's more here than just an affair." Her voice was quiet, certain. "I want to know how deep this goes." Isaiah's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building in the Loop. Clean lines, dark wood, nothing on the walls except his law degree and a framed photo of their mother. He kept his desk clear as a rule, so when Simone walked in 3 days later and saw papers covering every inch of it, she knew before he said a word that it was bad. "Sit down," he said. He wasn't gentle about it. Isaiah never was, when the news was serious. He believed softening things wasted time. Simone sat. She set her bag on the floor, crossed her ankles, and looked at the papers. Bank statements, transfer records, a spreadsheet with highlighted rows, a printed copy of what looked like a partnership agreement, her own name visible near the bottom of the first page. "You know about the consultancy," Isaiah said. It wasn't a question. "Whitfield Voss Marketing," Simone said. "Douglas and Gregory Voss started it about 4 years ago. I put in a minority investment when they launched, $12,000. She looked up at him. "I never asked for a seat at the table. It was Douglas's thing." "It's your name on the liability structure," Isaiah said flatly. He pulled one sheet from the pile and turned it to face her. "And your money is part of what made this possible." He walked her through it the way he walked through every contract, line by line, no detours. Over the past 14 months, Douglas had been skimming client retainer payments from the consultancy's operating account. Small amounts at first, $400 here, $800 there, then larger ones. The total, across 11 separate transfers, came to just over $46,000. All of it routed through a personal account that Simone had never seen before, set up under a variation of Douglas's middle name. That money had paid for Ashley's ring. It had covered the deposit on the new condo. It had funded 14 months of dinners, hotel stays, and a weekend trip to Charleston that Douglas had told Simone was a client retreat. "The clients paid their retainers in good faith," Isaiah said. "That money was supposed to fund their campaigns. Instead, it went into Douglas's pocket. That's not a marital dispute." He tapped the page. "That's fraud." Simone looked at the transfer records. 11 lines. 11 separate decisions Douglas had made, each one deliberate, each one chosen. "And because I'm a named investor," she said slowly. "You're exposed," Isaiah said. "Not because you did anything wrong, but because your name is in the structure. If Gregory Voss or one of the defrauded clients files a complaint before you move, it looks like you knew. We need to get ahead of this." Simone nodded once. She picked up the transfer sheet and read each line carefully, the way she read contracts, the way she read every room she had ever been paid to transform, looking for what was really there underneath the surface. "You said there was something else," she said. Isaiah reached across the desk and pulled a second set of documents from beneath the bank records. These were internal, performance reports, account logs, something that looked like it had been exported from a project management system. "Ashley Monroe," he said, "account director at Douglas's firm. 2 of the diverted client accounts, Bramwell Partners and the Solace Group, were also credited to her internal performance numbers. Her Q4 review listed both as new business she'd developed independently." He paused. "She's been up for a promotion since January." Simone set down the transfer sheet. She looked at the new documents. Bramwell Partners, the Solace Group. Both names appeared in the diversion records and in Ashley's performance log. The dates aligned close enough to be deliberate. "She didn't originate those accounts," Simone said. "No, and the revenue attached to them wasn't clean. She pushed for them to be credited to her book right around the same time Douglas was moving the money." Isaiah leaned back in his chair. "I can't tell you she ran the scheme, but she knew what she was touching, and she put her name on it anyway. The office was quiet. 14 floors up, traffic moved silently below the window, small and far away. Simone thought about Ashley's face. She hadn't seen it clearly that night in the living room. The candles had been low and she'd been standing in shadow. But she remembered the sound of her voice, the tearful yes, the way she'd pressed her hand to her mouth like the moment was precious. She wondered if Ashley had thought about where the ring came from. She set the performance report down on top of the bank statements, aligning the corners carefully, the way she always did with things that needed to be kept in order. "Douglas will go to Gregory the moment he thinks something is wrong," she said. "He'll try to manage the story before anyone else can tell it." "Yes," Isaiah said. "Then I need to get to Gregory first." She looked at her brother. "In person, before Douglas makes a single phone call." She stood, picked up her bag, and smoothed the front of her jacket. "Can you get me a full copy of everything? Every page?" "Already printed," Isaiah said. He handed her a manila envelope, thick and sealed. Simone took it. She held it at her side. "Set up the meeting," she said. Simone came home that evening like nothing had changed. She parked in the driveway, walked through the front door, and set her keys on the hook. She asked Douglas how his day was. She made pasta with the sauce he liked, the one with the sun-dried tomatoes, and she set 2 plates on the table and listened while he talked about a client meeting that had run long. He was a good talker. He always had been. She used to love that about him. Now she watched his mouth move and thought about the 11 transfer lines on Isaiah's spreadsheet. He brought it up on the 3rd evening. They were sitting in the living room after dinner. Douglas had his glass of wine. Simone had hers. The television was on, but neither of them was watching it. "I've been thinking," he said. He leaned forward, set his glass on the coffee table. His voice was careful, measured, the voice he used in presentations. "I think we might need some space. A trial separation, just to figure out where we both are." He said both, like this was something that had happened to them equally, like the distance had grown on its own, from both sides, the way rust forms on something left in the rain. Simone looked at him for a moment. "Okay," she said. He blinked. He'd been braced for something else. She could see it in the small flicker of surprise he couldn't quite hide. "Just like that?" he said. "You said you need space," she said. "I'm not going to beg you, Douglas." He nodded slowly, and she could see him recalibrating, settling into the version of this where she was sad but reasonable, cooperative. He reached over and touched her hand briefly, the gesture of a man who wanted to feel like a decent person. "I think it's the right thing," he said, "for both of us." She let him keep the hand. She kept her face soft and still. The next morning, Isaiah filed the divorce petition. The 40-second video was attached as Exhibit A. The bank statements, transfer records, and the full financial trail from the consultancy were filed as Exhibit B. The filing was sealed, per Isaiah's instruction, pending service of process. Douglas would not see it until Simone was ready for him to see it. Isaiah called her when it was done. "It's filed," he said. "Everything is sealed. He has no idea." "Good," she said. She met Gregory Voss 2 days later at a coffee shop in River North, far enough from the consultancy's office that no one would see them. He was a tall man, careful in his movements, the kind of person who folded his napkin before he put it in his lap. He'd always been polite to Simone at firm events, professional, a little formal. He looked at her across the table with the expression of a man who had already sensed something was wrong but hadn't yet let himself believe it. She set the manila envelope on the table between them and opened it. She didn't rush. She walked him through it the same way Isaiah had walked her through it, line by line, page by page. The 11 transfers, the dates, the amounts, the personal account Douglas had set up under a variation of his middle name. Then she laid out the second set of documents, the performance logs, Ashley's inflated numbers, the 2 client accounts, Bramwell Partners and the Solace Group, appearing in both the diversion records and Ashley's Q4 review. Gregory didn't speak for a long time. He picked up the transfer sheet. He set it down. He picked up the performance log. "These dates," he said. "Are not a coincidence," Simone said. He pressed 2 fingers to his mouth and looked out the window. A city bus moved past. A woman pushed a stroller. The coffee shop hummed with other people's ordinary conversations. "I need to verify this independently," he said. "You understand that?" "I do," Simone said. "That's why I'm bringing it to you and not anyone else. I want you to look at it yourself. I want you to see what's there." He nodded. He was already somewhere else in his mind, already moving through the implications, the liability, the clients, the firm's name. She could see it in his eyes. "I'll need copies," he said. "Everything in that envelope is yours." He closed the envelope and held it in both hands. He looked at her. "Why come to me now? Why not go straight to—" "Because you deserve to know first," she said simply. "And because, when this comes out, I don't want it to look like I sat on it." He looked at her for one more beat. Then he nodded once, slowly, and slid the envelope into his bag. That same week, Isaiah helped Simone move her client contracts into a protected business account, restructured cleanly away from anything Douglas's name had ever touched. Half the studio's assets followed. Her work was insulated. She did it quietly. No announcements, no explanations, just paperwork, filed and sealed, the way you board up a window before the storm arrives. The call from Douglas came on a Tuesday afternoon. "I wanted to tell you myself," he said. "Ashley and I are having a small engagement party, 3 weeks from Saturday. I know this is a lot, but I think it would mean something, to everyone, if you came." He paused. "It's the mature thing to do." Simone stood at her studio window. Below, the street moved in its usual quiet rhythm. "I'll be there," she said. The venue was a private room at a restaurant called Alderton's on the 14th floor of a building in the West Loop. Floor-to-ceiling windows, white tablecloths, candles in tall glass holders that threw warm, amber light across the room. Simone had been here before. A holiday party, 3 years ago. She remembered standing at those same windows with a glass of champagne, watching the city lights, thinking she was happy. She arrived at 7:15, 15 minutes after the invitation said 7. She wore a deep burgundy dress, clean-lined and fitted, with her hair up and her shoulders bare. She had not overdressed, but she had not underdressed either. She looked exactly like a woman who knew where she was going and had decided to look good getting there. The host at the door took her name. She gave it. "Whitfield," he said, scanning the list. "That's right," she said. "Simone Whitfield." The room was already full. She recognized most of the faces, Douglas's colleagues from the firm, a few of the consultancy's clients, people she had made small talk with at a dozen company dinners over the years. They knew her face. A few of them looked surprised to see her. Most of them smiled with the careful, uncertain warmth people use when they aren't sure what the protocol is. Patricia was near the entrance, standing beside Ashley in a cream blazer, her silver hair freshly done, her smile wide and proprietary, the smile of a woman who believed she had won something. She had her hand on Ashley's arm like she was already introducing her to the role. When she saw Simone, the smile didn't vanish, it just tightened. Simone. Her voice was warm the way a polished surface is warm, bright on top, cold underneath. "I didn't think you'd actually come. You should know me better than that," Simone said pleasantly. Ashley stood just beside Patricia with her champagne glass and her ring and her careful, composed expression. She was pretty and young, and she wore both of those things with a confidence that probably read, to everyone else in the room, as grace. She looked at Simone with something that was almost sympathy. "It means a lot," Ashley said, "that you're here." "I'm sure it does," Simone said. She moved into the room. Gregory Voss was standing near the bar on the far side, a glass of water in his hand, not drinking from it. He watched her walk in, the way a man watches a weather system move across a horizon, still and very attentive. He gave her a small nod when she met his eyes. She nodded back and kept moving. Douglas found her near the window, 10 minutes in. He looked good. He always looked good. Navy suit, no tie, the easy confidence of a man who believed the room was glad he was in it. He touched her elbow briefly when he reached her. "You came," he said, his voice carrying a note of genuine surprise beneath the warmth. "You invited me," she said. "I did." He paused. "I meant what I said. It means a lot. that you can be here for this." She looked at him. His eyes were the same. That had always been the strangest part, how familiar someone could look while becoming a person you'd never really known. "I'm sure it will be memorable," she said. At 7:50, Douglas moved to the center of the room. Someone dimmed the music. He raised his glass. The room settled and turned toward him, the easy gathering of an audience that already liked the man at the front of it. Ashley stood nearby, glowing. Patricia watched from the side, chin lifted. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," Douglas said. His voice was smooth, shaped by years of presentations and client dinners. "Ashley and I are grateful to have the people we love most in the same room. This is, for me, a new beginning." He paused for effect. He was good at pauses. "Simone?" Her voice was calm and clear, and it cut straight across his pause like a line drawn in ink. Every head in the room turned. She was standing 6 feet from him, her phone already in her hand. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "I'd like to share something," she said, "before the toast." She turned the phone screen outward so the room could see it. She pressed play. The video began. The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of an audience waiting, but the sudden, dropped quiet of people who have heard something they were not prepared for. Douglas's voice came through the speaker, clear, unmistakable. The living room Simone had paid half the mortgage on, the rose petals, the candles, and Douglas on one knee in front of Ashley, saying, "You are my future," saying, "Spend your life with me." The camera catching the exact moment Ashley's hand went to her mouth, and she said yes through tears. The date and timestamp sat in the corner of the screen in white block numbers. 6 weeks ago. Several people looked at the ring on Ashley's finger, then back at the screen, then at Douglas. The music had stopped entirely. Simone lowered the phone. She stood still and straight, her expression composed, and waited. The silence held. It was the kind of silence that has weight to it, the kind that fills a room the way water fills a container, pressing into every corner, every gap between bodies, every carefully arranged centerpiece and white tablecloth. Then Gregory Voss set down his glass of water. He walked from the bar to the center of the room with the unhurried, deliberate step of a man who had been waiting for the right moment and had now decided it was here. He was not a dramatic person. That was what made it land so hard. He stopped a few feet from Douglas, straightened his jacket, and looked at him directly. "I need to address something," Gregory said, "in front of this room, because most of this room is either employed by or invested in work that's been directly affected." Douglas turned. The easy confidence had shifted, not gone yet, but strained at the edges, the way a charming smile looks when the eyes behind it have gone cold. "Gregory." "Don't." The word was quiet, final. "I've spent 3 days going through what Simone brought me. Client retainers, redirected deposits, an account that didn't exist in our partnership agreement." He paused. "You've been pulling money out of the consultancy for almost a year. Not errors, not oversights, deliberate transfers into a personal account." A man near the back of the room, one of the consultancy's clients, Simone recognized his face from a quarterly meeting 2 years ago, went very still. "Effective immediately," Gregory continued, "you're being removed from the consultancy. I've already spoken to legal. Your equity stake is frozen pending a full audit. Any client relationships you've been managing directly are being reassigned." Douglas's jaw tightened. "This is not the place. You picked the place." Gregory's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You put everyone in the same room. I'm just using it." Simone had been watching. She reached into the slim bag she'd carried in with her and pulled out a sealed envelope. She walked toward Douglas, her heels quiet on the floor, and held it out. He looked at it, then at her. "Divorce papers," she said. "Already filed. The fraud documentation is attached as an exhibit." She kept her voice even and low, meant only for him, though the room had gone so still it carried anyway. "The college fund? The condo deposit? The ring you bought on our joint credit line while I was at a conference, turning down work so I could come home and surprise you." She let that sit for exactly 1 second. "There is nothing left for you to negotiate with, Douglas. It's done." He didn't take the envelope immediately. His eyes moved across her face the way they used to when he was looking for a reaction, for the soft place he could press to change the temperature of a conversation. He didn't find one. She set the envelope against his chest, and he took it by reflex. Gregory had not moved far. He turned now and looked at Ashley. Ashley, who had been standing in the gathered silence with her champagne glass lowered and her expression carefully neutral, and her ring catching the amber candlelight the same way it had caught it 6 weeks ago in a living room that was not hers. "Ashley." Gregory's tone didn't shift. Professional. Clear. "The 2 client accounts you had credited to your performance review, Harlan Group and Meridian, both originated from retainers that were redirected through Douglas's personal account before being partially restored to look like active billings. You pushed internally to have them transferred to your book. You knew those accounts were off-cycle." "I didn't know where the money—" "You knew they weren't yours," he said. "That's the part your firm will care about." A woman near the window, Simone had seen her at the firm's holiday dinner, mid-level, sharp eyes, looked at Ashley with the careful, cataloging expression of someone filing information away. Ashley's composure cracked at the edges, just slightly, but the room had been watching her closely enough to catch it. "This is a conflict of interest and an ethics violation under your firm's own fraternization policy," Gregory said. "I've already been in contact with HR. That conversation will happen Monday morning, not here. But I wanted the record to be clear, in front of the people who've been working alongside you." Patricia had not spoken since the video played. She was still standing near the entrance, in her cream blazer, her silver hair perfectly set, her hand no longer on Ashley's arm. The wide, proprietary smile had gone. What was left was something smaller, a woman recalibrating in real time, surrounded by family members and colleagues who had just watched her version of events dissolve in front of them. Simone looked at her once. Patricia's eyes dropped first. Simone picked up her bag from the chair where she had set it. She did not make a speech. She did not look back at Douglas, who stood holding the envelope like he didn't know what it was. She did not look at Ashley, who had gone very quiet in a way that had nothing composed left in it. She walked across the room, through the gathering murmur of voices starting up again, past the tall glass candle holders and the white tablecloths, and the floor-to-ceiling windows where the city lights spread out below. The host at the door opened it for her. She walked out into the night. 8 months later, the wall was gone. That was the first thing Simone noticed every morning when she unlocked the studio. The wall between her original space and the empty suite next door, the one she had walked past for 2 years, the one she had quietly measured in her head and then talked herself out of, was gone. In its place was 22 feet of open floor, flooded with natural light from a bank of north-facing windows she'd had cleared and resealed in the first week of renovation. She stood in the middle of it now with a coffee in one hand and a materials binder in the other, barefoot on the new concrete floor that her team had poured and sealed themselves in a warm, matte charcoal. Sample boards lined the east wall in 3 rows. Client mood binders were stacked on the long oak drafting table she'd bought second-hand and refinished over a weekend in October. 2 junior designers worked at the far end of the room, talking quietly over a set of floor plans. One of them laughed at something the other said. Simone smiled at the sound of it. The expansion had not happened because things got easier. It had happened because she had stopped making herself smaller to leave room for someone else. The inquiry requests had picked up in the weeks after the party. She hadn't wanted that, hadn't courted it, but the story moved through the industry faster than she could have stopped it, and it brought attention. What that attention found when it arrived was a woman who was very, very good at her work. The clients who came out of curiosity stayed because of the portfolio. The ones who came directly, through referrals, through her new website, through the piece a design magazine ran in November, came for the work alone. She had signed the lease on the expanded space in October. By February, she had a waiting list. She was 35 now. She had turned 35 on a Tuesday in January, in this room, surrounded by her staff and a grocery store cake with uneven frosting that one of her junior designers had bought on her lunch break. It was nothing like the carefully planned birthday dinners Douglas used to arrange, the kind that were as much about being seen at the right restaurant as they were about her. This was better. She had stood in the middle of her studio with grocery store frosting on her thumb and thought, "This is exactly where I am supposed to be." The company van was parked outside on a Thursday morning in late March when she saw him. She didn't look for him. She wasn't thinking about him at all. She was carrying a stack of mood boards to the van, laughing with her office manager, Renata, about a client who had requested coastal grandmother energy, but make it menacing. And the laughter was real and easy, the kind that comes from a good week and good company and solid ground. She slid the boards into the back of the van and turned to take the next stack Renata was carrying out. That was when she noticed the figure across the parking lot. Douglas was standing beside a gray sedan she didn't recognize, parked near the edge of the lot. He was in a jacket she'd never seen before, slightly too casual for the way he used to dress, and he looked smaller somehow. Not in height, but in the way a person looks when the thing that was propping them up has been removed. He was watching her. He didn't wave. He didn't move toward her. She held his gaze for exactly 1 second, not in challenge, not in pain, just a flat, clear, brief moment of recognition. Then she turned back to Renata and took the next stack of boards. "You good?" Renata asked, watching her. "Completely," Simone said. And she meant it. She heard later, through Isaiah, that Douglas was consulting on a freelance basis now, picking up small contracts, nothing like the VP title he'd spent years building. The consultancy audit had been thorough, and the findings had traveled. Gregory had made sure of that. Ashley Monroe was in Tennessee now, living with her parents in a suburb outside Nashville. She had left the marketing industry entirely, something in insurance, Isaiah had heard, though he hadn't confirmed it. No promotion, no engagement, no trajectory, just a fresh start in a place where no one knew her name. Simone pulled out of the lot 5 minutes later. The city moved past her windows, unhurried and bright. March light hit the glass buildings on the main road and threw gold across the dashboard. She reached forward and turned the radio up. In the rear-view mirror, the parking lot shrank and disappeared. She didn't look back again. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!